Hi, folks. Welcome to this session. Thank you for joining in. I'm Tanya. I'm part of the marketing team at Pepper Content. And this is the fourth session as part of our second stage design marketing. It's a panel discussion on the digital ignition, being creative in a sensitive environment. I think everyone in the creative community today knows that being creative in a sensitive environment means finding ways to express ourselves that are both respectful as well as unique. It might mean using our creativity to find new ways to communicate with others or to find ways to solve problems. And how can we do that? What's the thin line? What is the ideal thought process? We'll answer all your questions in the upcoming panel. We have Smita Muraka, who's the CMO at Duroflex, Sai Ganesh, who's former head of brand Dunzo, Hitesh Rajwani, who's the CEO of Social Samosa, and the panel is moderated by Himanshu Goyal, who's the product and category lead at Pepper Content. So diving right into the session, folks, I think over to you, Himanshu. Please take up.
Awesome, guys. I think good to see you back again, everyone. I think this is personally my third session that I'm already moderating in the day, and a few more to come, and really excited for them as well. But as we were thinking about this event and everything to do around with creativity, I think the first thing that came up my mind is like bringing brand leads, brand heads, people who have built brands, how the narration around the brand should happen, how the consumer should perceive a brand, and that's when I started thinking of people who I can put and talk about it. And Hitesh, Smita, and Sai was a pretty obvious choice for me. So welcoming all of them, and I think I'm honored to moderate this session with three of them, and we're gonna talk about the digital ignition, basically how sensitive the audience, the I think the consumers of the media has become, and some concepts around cancel culture and how brands are taking this seriously and still coming up, breaking through the creative part in their marketing. So I think to start with, I know we will be using the term cancel culture, I think, quite a few times. I'll just maybe invite Sai and explain the audience what cancel culture means so that it pretty much becomes easy for the rest of the conversations to just use this one term. So Sai, over to you for just quickly explaining what cancel culture means.
No, I think most of us are aware of it, but the reason why we are discussing it from the marketing context is largely that given that most brands are today active on digital and social first, there is this trend that's starting where people might outrage against a campaign or a brand's action, right? It could be a press release, it could be defending a delivery partner, or it could be a specific social media post. And what we are discussing largely today is the relevance of it, and what are the things that we can do to sort of avoid any sort of cancel culture that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's I think crisply put. So that's what cancel culture means and how we are being sensitive around it in the brand building phase. And to start off with, I think digital content is now freely accessible and more accessible than any time before, right? And all thanks to Geo also giving internet to even like tier 3 and remote parts of India, with and the huge impact in the width of audience now that's there on the internet consuming content on daily basis, and more of content, not just let's say one billboard throughout the year. um, like audience has really become wide and also have to start developing like sensitive opinions around marketing campaigns content, right? So asking you, Smita, like what all things do you think that generally a brand need to keep in mind, and especially the consumer brands, people who are like brands who are interacting with a wider range of audience, and having you like the experience you have, what all things do you think the brand heads, brand custodians, or the marketing folks needs to keep in mind with, let's say, when they are brainstorming a new campaign, which is, let's say, taking up or going live? So yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Himanshu, for having me over. And, just to set context to this whole conversation, as Sai was saying, a lot of people are using the internet today, and most of them are on social media. The penetration of social media is like upwards of 50%. So you can imagine the amount of Indians in the heterogeneous country that we are in, right? So, unlike probably global brands, India, every brand needs to be clear as to what is the scale they're catering to and what is the audience, whether it is a certain cohort culturally or it is cross culture, gender. I mean, all these things have to be kept in mind. But the rules of a brand playbook don't change. It is about really being clear who your target audience is and what your tonality is, right? And if you choose to have a tonality which is very in your face, very bold, like examples like Diesel, that their tonality is very bold, and when they use words like stupid, idiot, and things like that. So that is their tonality, and globally it's been accepted because they've been consistent with it, right? So I'm not saying everybody needs to have a very generic tonality, then you don't become a strong brand. And in fact, Sai's brand is something we all love, the tonality they've chosen for Dunzo, which is very unlike probably what it could have been if there was not so much clarity. And similarly for Duroflex, we pre-pandemic we were considered a very boring brand, a very boring category also. Nobody was. It was not really a marketer's paradise to be part of the category. But what helped us is being very clear what is our tonality, who's our audience, and because it's a gender neutral kind of a buying behavior, it helped us, reach out to a lot more. We chose the language of being a sleep coach. So it's kind of very important that you stick to that consistently, because then what happens is, even if you say something which doesn't appeal to a certain set of audience, that is only that set of audience, and it doesn't become the narrative of the country, right? It is when you don't have this clarity as a brand and you keep experimenting things. Today's audience is also very smart to know that when a brand is being opportunist, right? And that actually really played out during COVID, when brands were making just frivolous, superficial conversations, and a lot of brands were called out. That it's not something that they really feel, or they're just trying to be opportunists and trying to get into this whole. A lot of brands started selling a lot of products which were not good. So I think today's audience, while we undermine them, they are kind of evolved to where we were as a branded world, many years back. So we should give them that credit. And if we are quite kind of clear what space we belong to, I'm not saying it is impossible to be part of the cancel culture, but you can hold that narrative till the end. You needn't give up on it because of a certain section trying to put you down as a brand. Yeah.
Yeah. I think interesting angle around it on the opportunist part, because yeah, I also feel some brands doing it. But Sai, I think you have been in the middle of like all this, because you're a consumer brand and there are two, three faces to it. There's store face, there's a delivery face, there's a consumer who is ordering face. So what's your take on this? Sai, you're on mute.
Sorry. So, like Smita said, I think the part about being authentic matters a lot, right? And I've said this before. How many of you have read this book called Fast, Cheap, and Viral by Ixico's marketing head Ashish Chopra, right? And Ashish has this beautiful way of saying that consumers today have a very low bullshit radar, right? They know when a consumer is being hoodwinked by a brand, or somebody is just saying something for the sake of it, not walking the talk, and so on, right? So as long as you're saying authentic, otherwise people will call you out. And that's really become one of the defining things about the cancel culture, as we call it, which is that consumers want to believe they're smarter than whoever's speaking to them. And you can see this in YouTube comments, right? Everybody who's if you go to the YouTube comments of any video, people are being much smarter, like saying, hey, this is what that person was trying to do, or this is the part which doesn't seem genuine. So as long as you're staying authentic and staying true to who your consumer is, I think people will accept it. If not, then there is a high risk of people calling you out, right? Like long ago, brands used to do campaigns saying "Save the Tiger," right? Being a telecom company, right? Now, in today's world, that doesn't fly, right? You have to sort of walk the talk, and that authenticity matters a lot more.
No, I think flipping the same question but with a different perspective, Hitesh, would love to understand your thoughts. Like, how do how should brands still ensure that the creative ideas are getting accepted by like a majority of the audience that they are targeting, while being sensitive? Like, how do you suggest, what are, like, you have analyzed a lot of companies, you've worked with a lot of brands, so how do you suggest like brands should ensure that the creative idea is accepted in a positive manner by a majority of their audience?
So a part of the answer, I think, Smita's already covered, wherein she's mentioned that how brands need to be very wary of the tonality or the personality they have, and like whether the conversation or the topic in question needs that kind of reverence from the brand in question, and like whether that is the space for the brand to be in. So I think there was one thing that you were all like someone was speaking about the thin line also. So I don't think there is a thin line per se. There is a circle. Like today, I as a brand might have a circle where I can operate in, but there are conversations that are happening outside that sphere, outside that circle, which I may or may not want to indulge in, but I should decide whether I should be indulging in those conversations only if it is worth my time and worth the risk. So it's about picturing that meme. Like I think a lot of new age people must have joined in this conversation as well. So there's that meme that a picture of Earth before and after your opinion on a certain subject. So as a brand, do you think that once you put out a piece of communication that has some macro impact on your audience or not? If you think that that is very momentary, very short term, I think that is the point where you stop and you rethink and realign. The point being, how do you ensure creativity to flourish in this environment? I think creativity actually flourishes in such uncomfortable environment. When you put people in within a box and ask them to think outside the box, only then you get great ideas coming in. Only then you feel that okay, there is there is something for my brand to explore in this segment. So I think creativity would come from being uncomfortable in a certain space, trying to explore things in a space where you don't belong initially but you want to own up to, and that can't happen in one instance. Like I was saying, that a brand saying that a telecom brand saying save the tiger and making that a flagship campaign for 2 years and then leaving that cause for good. It's about committing yourself to a certain theme, to a certain cause for the longer term. Only then the audience's bullshit radar would also accept what you are doing as a brand and would see that okay, you belong to that particular conversation, you belong to that particular topic.
Yeah, no, it is very right. I
I
think
just
when
want to add,
sorry,
sorry,
go on, side.
right? I'll just give two examples from recent times that we all are familiar with, right? Like recently, Bombay Shaving Company's founder said a lot of things and it got outraged, right? Because people didn't agree with, one, what he was saying, and secondly, it didn't have anything to do with what the company was mission was, right? Contrary to that, last week, right? Patagonia Inc., which has been a company that has always called itself the activist company, right, and stood for sustainability. They have now made Earth the biggest shareholder of the company. They've given the wealth back, right? So I think two instances where if you're staying true to what your brand ethos is and values are, people will respect that, and you will get a lot of free publicity and people will talk about it. But if you're not, then people are going to call you out again.
Yep, exactly. I think that's what I was also coming to. Like brands, if they're doing a campaign which is not completely relevant to what they, let's say, they're building or how they're earning, I think that's when this triggers. But yeah, I think that also, I think this triggers the bullshit radar. But speaking of this entire topic, right? Even in the industry, even in the market that a brand operates in, I sometimes also feel that, and would love to understand maybe you, Smita, your thoughts, that does this sensitive market or the audience sentimentals, if we keep everything every time that in mind, does it affect the creativity or the quality of content or the idea or aggressiveness of the content ideas that can come up, that can fuel in the marketing?
Yeah, I think I resonate with Hitesh over there. We can't be too greedy as marketers, right? In the past era, pre-social media era, there was a lot of time that could have been spent to really, go and understand the regional nuances. So, advertising agency, research agencies would spend months together if they're launching, let's say, in eastern part of India, Kolkata. They would spend time in really understanding the regional nuances, the language difference, and then put out a creative. Now today we don't have that luxury of time, right? So that whole research, the whole empathy towards your consumer is completely lost. But what we have gained is an instant connect with the consumer. I mean, we have the whole of India at our fingertips. Honestly, Duroflex was able to scale up so well, so drastically, and a lot of other brands, because we could become a national brand through digital first initiatives. So, if we have that benefit, we also should be cognizant of the problems associated with it and how to deal with it. And that's how your marketing team should be inducted into the whole world of branding. The youngsters today, I think, fail to understand what probably some of us and much older people also went through in getting a campaign out. So I think that sensitivity as a team one should have, that what comes with it. And today, the power of social media, you also get immediate reactions. So if at all you put out a creative, be quick enough to be at least there for the first 15-20 minutes to understand the reactions and sentiments, and then pull it off before it becomes, such a big problem. So there are ways to deal with it. I think what we still need to own and have is empathy, willingness to say sorry if we've really screwed up, and or stick to our narrative if it makes sense. It's okay if people don't agree, but if your target audience empathizes with it, makes sense. I think creativity is something that is about putting narratives out there that relate to your consumer. If you're not able to do that, then I mean, we're not living in a very, very what do you say, idealistic world that everything is perfect. I mean, this is the world. It's only going to get more and more screwed up. So definitely be ready for it and embrace it. And the most creative talent will prove themselves in any generation. So yeah, I think the fundamentals of marketing haven't changed. The way we should think for our brand and a consumer connect hasn't. It's just the medium, the instantness of social media, the population of it coming together instantly. All that has changed, but you should have your fundamentals strong, is what I really genuinely
Yeah.
believe in.
I think on that particular note, how Smita mentioned, like there might be a chance that you didn't foresee something going wrong and it's not taken up, like not appreciated a lot by the audience on social, on any other channel. But what's the next step? Like, Hitesh, how would you think about it? Like, is it fair enough to take it down and just forget about it, or do you think that is stay there and maybe own it up, or maybe the third option is to apologize, realize what went wrong and what did we miss? Like, what's the best way a brand should do? And maybe it can be situational, so you can talk about that as well. But what do you suggest?
So, in the words of the great Ravi Shastri's, all possibilities can happen in this situation, right? I mean, say if you've gone really, really wrong and you have also realized in the first few hours or minutes, like Smita mentioned, that it's not something which is right. I won't say that you should pull it off, but you should issue an apology or own it up in the sense that you say that, yes, we have fucked it up and we would want to make it right for the audience. But that is like that I think 15 minutes is too small a time frame to judge that. Like a structured approach to this would be to sort of apply a filter on the kind of conversations that are happening around that. So, like Sai had mentioned, that you check on the comment section, you try to understand and you try to filter the message out of the noise, whether that message is still valid without people writing it in all caps, or like if you remove abuses from that message and those all cap stuff and still you think, yeah, there is some genuine criticism coming out of it, then probably you should act up in a way that you try to correct your narrative or you try to correct your stance on that particular situation. But if while filtering you figure that all this is noise, there's no real uh, merit in that conversation that is happening, or there's no real criticism, it's just people bashing and shouting and yelling at your brand, then you should stick and hold your ground. I mean, it's not necessary to pull off a certain piece of ad just because a bunch of people who are like online activists in nature, very aggressive, might not even be the target audience that you are targeting, or might not even cater to a set of audiences who are relevant to your brand. So you just stick to your ground in that situation. And the third bit is like in that conversation, if you find, and this is like a blessing in disguise for your brand, that in that conversation that you find that you don't even have to put out and defend your situation or your stance, because your advocates, people who love your brand, are already doing that for you. So you let the situation play out in that case, in that scenario. So what one thing that brands need to do is probably have this kind of a template in place, that I try filtering out conversations, try putting them in bucket, and then analyze that whether there is a need for an action, or there is a need for me to wait and watch, or there is a follow through that I could do. So I think even with Dunzo, what happened, because it's one of the most loved brands, and I think that fridge campaign didn't go well with a lot of conventional people, a lot of people who are very traditional in nature. But still, I think Dunzo held the ground, continued the campaign the way it was to be, and then overall, like if you see the conversation spectrum after a month, you would see that there are a bunch of people who are bashing that ad. There are a bunch of people who really appreciate the uniqueness or the shock factor in that particular piece of communication. So eventually, you see that okay, like your net target audience is liking what you're doing. There are a bunch of new brand advocates that you found with that campaign, and that is the gain for your brand. So it's not about being very very quick to react to it. You should take your time and figure it out whether, again, like I said, it's is it worth taking an action, or is it worth waiting and watching for you as a brand.
Yeah. I think I'll come to the last question and also doing a time check here. So, Sai, to you, like, and Hitesh already set the stage for my next question, that you have also experienced some part of it in the past. So, what's the, like, any internal or external pressure, maybe the founders or the business or maybe investors? What's the pressure like when something goes wrong, and what's maybe an ideal way, or as some if someone has asked in the comments book, what's a rule book that you guys follow or that someone should follow, maybe stay away from the trouble next time and maybe troubleshoot the problem that has occurred right now?
So two, three things, right? I think one thing we've also learned when I was at Dunzo is that to have a quality check internally, right? Because let's say, for example, if four of us were in a marketing team, right? We're all going to think from a marketing lens. We have diversity in terms of gender, but we may not have diversity in terms of, let's say, languages spoken or the kind of age group, right? We may not think from it from a point of view of a 19-year-old, right? So I think having that sort of diverse quality check internally helps a lot to not repeat mistakes. The second is, I think one thing to remember is just how big the outrage is, right? In my experience, no matter what, most of these outrage campaigns that happen on social media have very little impact in the long run or medium term for a brand, right? Like for example, even when Zomato had this whole controversy around a delivery partner and defending not revealing the religion or something like that, right? Like for a few days there was downvoting on the app store of Zomato, but beyond the point it had no impact on the brand, right? So and I'm saying this because a lot of let's say young founders, right, they look at one comment or one tweet and say that, hey, people are outraging. It doesn't, right? Like people have memory of a goldfish, right? Like nobody's going to change their buying behavior because of something that you said on social media, or they think that there's an outrage happening, right? So I think if you have quality checks internally, and if you think as a brand or a team that there's been a genuine mistake, then you should always own up to it, right? But again, like Hitesh said, you don't need to go out of the way to create more noise. People will forget and move on, right? And yeah, just judge whether this has a potential to blow up, right? Like typically look at if it's growing. So we've had this experience where we put something out, there was a growing angst against it, we pulled it down, right? But most of the time we don't, we just push something out and people will immediately get distracted almost, right, so to speak. So that's been sort of our practice earlier.
Yeah. On the same note, Smita, what are your thoughts? Like, how does same thing affect you as a leader while facing both the external thing and internal thing? And from the angle also business, right? At what point do you think such a thing affects the business? I know it might affect the brand, but at what time does it start affecting the business also?
I think branded business is one, right? It shouldn't be, and if you're trying to differentiate, that's where the whole problem is. So, really, your brand and business should be one entity, and marketing team very often tend to work in silo away from the business, which is not right. You should really be ingrained in the business. If it's a large campaign, all stakeholders should be really inducted into it before it goes out. I think that's a very large part, which is difficult to do because you're so emotionally attached to the creative of the campaign, right? But it's very important that stakeholders buy into it if it's a large campaign. If it is something small, then quality check, as I said, is again a step that in the creative urge to just put it out there, you miss out. But that's the biggest step even I would swear by as a team, and that's a culture you're really inducting into the team. I think once you do all this and then you put out, then you're a team that can stand by it. But yeah, if it's completely wrong, or if there's a spello which is probably human, not right as a brand, then you pull it down. But if it is something that I mean, you've really screwed up and it is just not right, then definitely an apology, a public apology, because in social media you really can't be assured that even a minute is left unattended, right? So an apology is great. So I think the culture of the marketing team and the culture of the business in terms of how much they support the marketing team, that's really liberating for a team to really be creative at the same time do what's right for the brand and stick to that narrative. So I think it again boils down to your internal culture and how the team is groomed.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I've also seen, maybe heard, not seen, and would love to validate and collect your thoughts. And Hitesh, would love to collect that answer from you on some brands, especially the smaller ones, using such things as a way to, like a growth hack, right? If you say something, I think slightly out of the line, it's a quick way to get a lot of attention. But what do you suggest? Like, what's your advice for people who might be thinking of such a thing in in future? And I'm pretty sure it's gonna be, let's don't not do it. But how would you want to put it? Like, what's the after effects of it? What's the ripple effects of the same? Hitesh, you're on mute. Maybe you have your mic on.
Yeah. Something like you answered it right. I mean, like it shouldn't be done in the first place. But as a brand, like I would go back to what Smita had said earlier, and I think Sai and I have also mentioned that in bits. That if you think that this is a personality that you want to build of your brand, like that of being a young brat kid who has an opinion on anything and everything, who wants to rise to an occasion basis controversies, and you want to continue that perception being built over time, then you can, as a, like, even if you're a young brand, small brand, you can afford to do that. But um, as to, like, to answer specifically as to the whether it should be done or not, or like your question, can you just rephrase it again? I mean, like,
Like, basically, if someone is trying to use that as a growth hack to just basically get a lot of attention, whether negative or positive, and then we're gonna figure it out later on.
yeah.
What do you advise such people, such brand leads, or any creative person?
So, I mean, that's what I mean. One thing, like you said, it shouldn't be done. But if you want to do this, then you should see that again. It's whether it's worth the risk and worth the effort and time that you put into something like this. So, Bombay Shaving Company, like Sai said, I think I didn't really appreciate the way, like, the aftermath of it also played out, saying that all this resulted in a PR of some 96 CR or something. But eventually, it's not really something to flaunt and to talk about. Like, though you must have done that and you must have gained that, but I don't think it makes sense to even own up that and say that, okay, yeah, I did this and this happened to my brand. So, like, I don't think there is a shortcut or a growth hack there, like, for a brand to be controversial and get something out of it. Because eventually, this is like, this won't add up to what you do as a business. This won't add up to, this won't give your audience also a better image or a better perception about you as a brand. One thing, while Sai was talking, I wanted to add, I think these boycott trends, or like, I think 99% of these boycott trends don't have any relevance whatsoever. I mean, they don't have any impact on the business or the brand metric at all. I mean, none of them really result into a dip in sale or even a increment in sale, because all this has to happen consistently over a period of time. So if a brand is being boycotted consistently every week, every month, only then the brand manager needs to worry about it. Apart from, it's something that the internet has given so much power to people that they would have something to get offended with every day. So yeah.
Yep. Well, that's about it. I think it is you answer you. I think kind of gave a very good closing note. Also, I try to took some questions from the audience pool, but guys would love to appreciate if the questions are relevant to the topic. If you guys want answers from the speakers on some other topics. Speakers would just request you if you can stay for 5-7 minutes in the bay and just answer like some of the questions that people have. But we'll not waste any further time. We are already up 8 minutes and the next session is lined up. But it was very nice, Sai, Hitesh, and Smita talking about you on a very sensitive topic. I personally learned a lot. But yeah, thanks a lot for your wisdomful words. Thanks a lot. Over to you, Tanya.
Thank you.
Awesome. No, I think fantastic session. I personally enjoyed it. I mean, we need to be sensitive, especially in these times, and you all have built brands that have, actually been successes in these sensitive times. So, no, I think great. Thank you for being on board, folks. In the meantime, thank you, folks. Signing off. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.